Here we go. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game.
Dobbs drops back, looks, loads up, fires long for the end zone. The pass is going to be caught by Tennessee. Tennessee wins! Caught it by Tennessee. Jawan Jennings. Jennings makes the catch in the end zone on the Hail Mary.
I don't believe I saw that.
To the right, Bennett to tight end left. Second and goal to go from the 2. Toss sweep right for James White. Cuts it under the right arm. Cuts it upfield. Driving forward. Diving to the goal line. A touchdown. And a title for the Patriots.
I can't believe it.
They have completed the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history.
This is the Saturday 6 podcast, broadcasting to you on this beautiful Saturday morning where we have got a slate of a couple of nice college football games and a slate of really good NFL games that will guide you throughout this beautiful football weekend. College football season almost coming to a close here as we embark on these last couple of weeks. I am, of course, joined by my co-host Chris Mason. Chris, how are you?
Not so well today, CJ.
Not so well? Why's that?
My Kentucky Wildcats have to face the Georgia Bulldogs, and I don't think it's going to look too well for us at the end of the day.
Oh, so Georgia's like a 21-point favorite in that game, correct?
It's a lot. It's a whole lot.
Yeah, I would not want to face a Georgia team coming off an embarrassing loss like they had last week. Because right now that team is going to come out motivated, fired up, and I think they're going to give Kentucky a really tough time Saturday. But one of the other games happening this Saturday, and it's in the Big Ten. This is a big one, kind of flying in under the radar. But this to me is kind of the big game of the weekend. Michigan at Wisconsin. The line here, Badgers minus 7.5. Over under 39. Now, Chris, I saw that line and thought it was interesting because Vegas is not only saying we like Wisconsin so much we're going to give them a touchdown, they're saying we're not just going to give them a touchdown, we're going to give them that extra half a point, meaning for Wisconsin to cover, they've now got to win by 8 or more. So they're basically saying we think this is really close to a 2-possession game. Was that a bit of a surprise to you?
No, not really. It's two things. Number one, it's Wisconsin has home field advantage. Number two, their defense has been really stout, especially the last 3 or 4 games. So not too much of a surprise to me.
Yeah, no, the defense has been stout the past several games. I mean, I'm telling you, this defense all season long has been very, very good. One of the things I really like about this team is they rank first in the country at converting third downs. They are incredibly difficult to get off the field. Now, you bring up that great defense they've had all season long. That defense ranks second in the country in points, first in the country in yards. And to me, one of the big statistics to look at is yards per play. Defensively, Chris, this team ranks second in yards per play. I love that about Wisconsin. And to top all of that off, this Michigan offense has not been very good this year, have they?
Hit or miss. I mean, some games they look great. Some games not so much. I mean, their last 5 games, they scored 35 against Maryland, 33 against Minnesota, 35 against Rutgers. Only scored 13 in a loss to Penn State, and then scored 27 against Indiana. So 30, 35 points a game. That's not miserable, but it just kind of depends on which team shows up. It seems like they have 2 different personalities.
No, you're on to something. And the thing about Michigan is in these past 3 games, they've outscored their opponents 35-10. So you look at the record, it's not crazy impressive, but you look at recent success, and I told you at the start of the year, I thought Michigan, a really young team that would come into their own late in the year. In these past 3 games, Michigan has started to look like a Jim Harbaugh coach team. Really, really efficient offensively. They're not going to put up a ton of points. Harbaugh's never been into putting up a ton of points. They're efficient, though. They stay on the field, and you're starting to see what this team can do. And as these players mature and become a little bit older and more experienced. Now, you bring up Penn State, Chris. Penn State's the only team to score more than 20 points against the Wolverines. I think this is going to be a really defensive matchup, hard-hitting, blue blood type of game.
Oh, I definitely agree. I don't think when I give you my final score, neither team is going to have over 20 points, and so it's going to be tough to me if you don't score that many points to win by 7.5. So it's a pretty tough line.
No, that's the interesting thing. So, I mean, like, the over-under here from Vegas is 39. So they're telling you not a high-scoring game, and we still like Wisconsin minus 7.5. Like, if that line to me, if the over-under here were closer to 60 or 65, like a Big 12 game, Wisconsin would actually be favored by about 10.5 or 11 points. So I think that's Vegas telling you we really like this Wisconsin team. Let's get to our picks. The line here again, Badgers minus 7.5, over under 39. Chris, where do you lean on this one?
I've got Wisconsin winning the game, but in a very close game, 14-17.
Okay, so you've got Wisconsin winning this one 14-17, which means you're taking the Wolverines to cover the 7.5. So Vegas is telling you this game's going to be incredibly low scoring. They're giving you Wisconsin by more than a touchdown. That is a complete disrespect to Michigan's offense, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, I don't think the Badgers are talented enough to beat Michigan by more than 7 points, and Jim Harbaugh isn't like going to get completely outcoached by Paul Chryst. Harbaugh is a better coach. I'm going to take the Badgers, but I will take Michigan to cover. Give me Wisconsin 17-13. All right, let's move on to our second game. UCLA at USC. Trojans favored by 16 with an over-under of 71.5. Chris, this is the game of the two professional quarterbacks, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. What do you see here with UCLA?
UCLA, look, they're 5-5. I think that's underperforming where a lot of people thought they would be at the beginning of the season. But I think this game's actually going to be a little closer. Look, this is a rivalry game. If there's a rivalry in college football, it's USC-UCLA, which is the reason we're talking about it. I mean, I don't think we've brought on many 5-5 teams on this show, but I do think that UCLA is going to hold their own Saturday or today.
Well, yeah. No, I think, one of the things you look at with this UCLA team is Josh Rosen, has been, to me, if there was, and the Heisman's not an MVP award, but if there was a college MVP award, I think you could give it to Josh Rosen because UCLA's offense has been very, very good this season. The problem is their defense has been absolutely pathetic. It ranks, Chris, the defense ranks 121st in the country. That's only 7 spots away from worst, while their offense is averaging 35 points per game this year, and that ranks 22nd in the country. So, I look at Josh Rosen and what he's done with this team. I think he's the difference maker in these big games. Now, they played last year. It was a dominant performance by USC. They won that one 37-14, and now USC gets this one at home. The Trojans, Chris, have been a little bit underperforming this year, had that big loss to Notre Dame. You and I watched that game together. What were some things you thought of watching Sam Darnold and the Trojans offense get trounced by Notre Dame?
Well, yeah, it was really Darnold was just being ridiculously crazy with the ball. I forget how many interceptions he had, but it felt like 20. And they just weren't able to move the ball at all. And so I was like, man, is this the guy that really is going to go number one draft and is, leader at that point to win the Heisman? And I think since then that's fallen off a little bit, but, still to be seen.
Now, you talk about this offense. They did have that tough game with Notre Dame, but they do rank in the top 25 in every statistical category except rushing, where they rank 34th. So that to me is a big deal. And since that loss to Notre Dame, they've actually been rolling good programs. They played Arizona State, Arizona, and Colorado, all 3 of which could be bowl teams, and 2 of which were on the road. In those 3 games, they have outscored their opponents 45 24-25. That game against Notre Dame, by the way, they had a lot of injuries, especially in the offensive line, and I think Sam Darnold knew it and was just going incredibly aggressive in that game. I don't really think that game was indicative of how good USC is or how good Josh Rosen is. So I look at USC, I think they're a much better team than people are giving them credit for. Chris, here to me is my one big issue with UCLA coming into this game. Put everything else aside, put the rivalry aside. UCLA ranks 119th in turnover margin and 120th in penalties. So if Sam Darnold's biggest weakness is that he turns the ball over, I don't think you're going to see a lot of them this afternoon.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think UCLA's defense is tough enough to cause a lot of turnovers. It's really, to me, just going to be kind of a battle to see who can get the most points on the scoreboard. I know we talked about the John Madden comment, but it's not going to be too much defense, I don't think, in this game. It's going to be a lot of offense.
Completely agree. So UCLA at USC, the line here, Trojans -16, and our over-under, Vegas likes the offense here, 71.5. Chris, give us your pick.
I've got UCLA winning the game, but not covering that 16 points. I think that's a lot. I'm going USC 41, UCLA 31.
Wow, so 41-31, you don't have them covering the 16. Both of these teams have played sloppy football all season. However, a lot of USC's issues have been a result of the offensive line have multiple injuries, and then you've got younger guys who aren't as talented coming in and trying to fill those shoes. As this team has healed, USC has found their dominant ways again. With UCLA's defense being as bad as they've been, I just don't foresee a situation in which USC scores less than 30 points. And also keep in mind, Josh Rosen against USC really struggled last year, and that was at home. Now we go into the Rose Bowl, and I'm going to take the Trojans to win this one 44-20, covering that 16-point spread. Let's shift gears and go over to the NFL. Chris, this to me could be the game of the weekend, and not many people are talking about it, but the Rams at the Vikings, two teams at the start of the year. I think a lot of people thought would be good, not this good. Yet here both of them are 7-2 on the year. Now it's in Minnesota. The line is Minnesota -2 and an over-under of 46. Chris, you look at Jared Goff and the Rams, they've been rolling recently. What do you like about this team?
Well, first off, I want to agree with your sentiment. I mean, at the beginning of the season, if we would have said week 10 that the Rams and Vikings was going to be the game of the week, people would have looked at us like, what are you talking about? So let's talk about the Rams. Yeah, well, the thing, Jared Goff, he has only 4 interceptions for the year, and the reason he can do that is because Todd Gurley stands behind him, who has 750 yards already and 7 touchdowns for the year. So very good start for their offense, and it's a very balanced approach. And so they can just hit you multiple ways.
No, they definitely can, and I mean, this is, one of the things about the Rams. Since Sean McVay has taken over Los Angeles, Jared Goff has gone from, last year a lot of people talking about him being a potential bust, and now they're saying, could he have the same potential that Carson Wentz has? The Rams lead the league in yards per pass and rank 6th in passing yards per game. However, they rank 27th in passing attempts per game. So what that tells me is that they aren't throwing the ball very much. But when they do, it goes for chunks of yards. And Chris, this offense right now is statistically the best offense in the NFL, averaging 33 points per game. I have no doubt right now my coach of the year has got to be Sean McVay.
Oh, yeah, he's really turning around this team. I mean, he's done a great job, so I don't see how he can't win that.
Now, you bring up Todd Gurley. Behind Todd Gurley, this rushing attack ranks 5th in the league, so that's been very dominant, too. And the one thing with that is, like, when the Rams get a lead, they don't really give it up because they're going to run the ball, milk the clock, and you're not going to get the ball that many more times. So the only way I think Minnesota has a chance in this one is if they get off to an early start. But with all of that said, Minnesota's looked like absolutely incredible as well. Last week, they smoked the Redskins. Forget what the score said. The Vikings dominated 3/4 of that game. And this now looks like it looks like they could really take home the NFC North Division Championship.
Oh, yeah, it's wide open for them. I mean, the Lions aren't going to catch up to them. The Packers are falling apart, and the Bears are the Bears. So I think the Vikings for sure make the playoffs and end up winning the North.
No, I completely agree with that. We talk about the Rams' offense. The Vikings really live and die by their defense, which ranks 5th in the league. They also have one of the best offensive lines in the league. People don't realize this, but they rank 2nd in sacks allowed. Now, Chris, one of the big talking points with Minnesota has been Case Keenum's kind of come on the scene. Teddy Bridgewater is sitting there ready to go in whenever. How much does that play into this weekend? Like, if Case Keenum gets off to a rough start, which the Rams have a good pass rush, Aaron Donald, good player. So if the Vikings and Case Keenum get off to a rough start, do you think the Vikings maybe consider putting Bridgewater in?
I don't see that happening. I don't think it's going to happen even this season. I'm a big Bridgewater fan. Ever since he started with the Vikings, he went to Louisville, so I just have to hate him on my inside. But he's a great kid and has done a lot of good for the Louisville area and in Minnesota. But no, I don't see him coming in this game. I really don't see him playing this year unless something happens to Keenum. I don't. I mean, why would you do that? Why would you put him in? Why would like the same reason that Tony Romo didn't play when Dak Prescott was playing so hot last year and took Romo's job. So I don't see how that can happen. Now next year, I think Bridgewater's your guy, but Keenum's just playing too hot right now, unless there's some type of injury or unforeseen circumstance. But you're right though about the Rams. They have 28 sacks on the season. I think that makes them fifth overall in sacks for the year.
Well, and Aaron Donald, I mean, this kid's been an absolute monster. He's got 5 of those sacks. He's also forced 3 fumbles. We're just 8 games into the year, so it's like every game he's doing something else to help this team. They rank 3rd in sack percentage, which is a big statistic I like to look at, and 10th in yards per pass allowed. I think this defense, everybody likes to talk about the Rams and this offense. This defense, though, has been very, very good. And the one statistic that I think everybody should be aware of before they pick this game is the Rams in their last 3 games have outscored their opponents by 39-8. In the NFL, that is an absolutely outrageous. That's a high number in college. In the NFL, that is an outrageous number. And they've played, by the way, 2 playoff teams, Dallas and Jacksonville. Their other one was against the Giants. But every single one of these games has been consistent. Chris, let's get to our picks. It's in Minnesota. I think there's a big home field advantage in Minnesota people don't think about or know about yet. Minnesota favored by 2, over under 46. Where do you go?
Gosh, this game is so tough, CJ. Again, this is my game that you should not bet for the week. I feel like I give you one of those every week, but I'm going to take Minnesota in a field goal of 27-24.
This is absolutely incredible. So this I think is the hardest game of the weekend to pick. I love what the Rams are doing, and I'm not crazy about the Keenum Bridgewater saga. I know Keenum's played great, but my concern is if Keenum gets off to a rough start, even if the Vikings aren't planning on putting Bridgewater in, you're going to see him on the sideline, and when you see him on the sideline, you're going to think about every great play he's ever made, and that will constantly be playing through your head throughout this game. I don't like the emotional part of that. I'm going to take the Rams in this one, in a close one, by a field goal, 27-24.
Wow.
So we've got the exact same score. We've just got different teams winning it. You've got Minnesota covering. I've got the Rams covering. All right, let's go to the next one. This is the one you've got some pretty direct interest in. It's another interesting game. Philadelphia travels to Dallas. Eagles favored by 4.5 and are over-under 48.5. Chris, Carson Wentz has been great. Eagles have been great. They look like the best team in the NFL right now, no?
Yeah, they look pretty good. They won their last 5 games very decisively. None of them even really close, except for at Carolina, and they won that one by 5 points. If I remember that game, though, it was never really in jeopardy of losing. But yeah, the Eagles look amazing right now, unfortunately.
They rank in the top 6 in every major offensive statistical category except passing yards per game, but don't hold that against them because typically with the Eagles, by the time the fourth quarters come around, they've already won that game, and so they're just running the ball from there on out. Carson Wentz has looked like a wizard this year, and the Eagles right now rank 2nd in the league. Something to keep in mind, though, Chris, as good as they've been, Philadelphia on the road has been a different team. They've only played 3 road games. They're 2-1 in those games, and here's the big kicker. They're averaging 24 points per game offensively, and their defense is allowing 24 points per game defensively. So they are basically a 500 team when traveling. We get Dallas coming off of that embarrassing loss last week in Atlanta, and Dallas had some injuries that week. Sean Lee went out. You had that left tackle, Tyron Smith, go down. That was a big injury. Because Cowboys have a lot of injuries coming off that embarrassing loss. I think there's some good things to like here about Dallas in this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, we still have Ezekiel Elliott, and he's just going to run the ball all over the place. Wait, what? Ezekiel Elliott's not in? Oh, crap.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be the toughest part, I think, is offensively. If Dallas is one-dimensional with Ezekiel Elliott out, then I don't think they have a chance even to be close in this game. If they're still able to run the ball, which I've said it all season, I said it all last season, it's not the running back, it's the offensive line. And then, of course, last week the offensive line gets embarrassed, allowing 12 sacks and wasn't able to move the ball at all offensively. So it's so tough. I don't know because Dallas had kind of an embarrassing loss. If you remember, I think it was week 2 or 3 at Denver. And just got crushed and was not able to do anything offensively, including run the ball. And they came back after that and had some pretty nice wins. And so if that's the response is, look, we're still in this thing, we can still come back and win, then I think Dallas is going to be good. If not, they could just kind of give up and not play well with Ezekiel out of the game and get crushed by a very good Eagles team.
This is the thing now. People like to talk about Ezekiel Elliott. I like Zeke a lot, but here to me is the biggest thing with this one. Sean Lee, I think, is the most valuable player on that Cowboys team. When Sean Lee plays, they're somewhere around 6-1, and when he doesn't play, they're 2-5. That to me is just a stat I can't get away from. I think if he's out again this week, that's going to be a big difference maker. And you looked at Dak last week. I mean, they missed Zeke. That was certainly a big deal. The big problem with all of that, though, is Dak was sacked 8 times in that game with Tyron Smith sidelined. So it's not just can this team get by without running the ball, can they protect Dak? Chris, Philly -4.5, over under 48.5. Where do you go with this one?
So, yeah, this has nothing to do with my allegiance to Dallas, but I've said it all season. I'm going to stick with this. Dallas is a home team underdog. So I'm going to say Philadelphia wins by field goal. Let's call it Philly is going to score 31, Dallas 28.
Wow, we're really close on this one again. I typically would take Philly to win this game. They've been rolling all year long. They look like the best team in the NFL, but I'm getting a team that was embarrassed last week, and they're a home underdog. A home underdog. I love this pick right now with Dallas. I've got 2 rules. Take teams at home coming off embarrassing losses, and we've got this one here. I'm going to take Cowboys to cover and win outright 27-24 against Philadelphia. All right, let's move on to our next game. Falcons at Seahawks. The line here, Seattle -3, over-under 45. Chris, we got to roll if we're going to make it in 30 minutes. Give me some notes here on Atlanta.
Well, gosh, after what they did with the Cowboys, their defense looks amazing. They have a list of injuries themselves. They've got to travel. Correct me if I'm wrong. This one's at Seattle, right? So they're traveling to Seattle.
Yeah.
Here, so that could be very tough on them with the way Seattle's played at home this year.
No, it is going to be tough, and it's supposed to be cold and it's supposed to be rainy. Atlanta plays games in a dome. It's always warm. It's always a turf game. This is going to be on grass. It's going to be a weather game, rain, cold. Those are a couple of things I think Atlanta has to look at. Now, last year this team reached the Super Bowl. Since then, the Falcons have really struggled this year. They barely sit above 500 at 5-4. One thing I like about Atlanta, though, Chris, is that they are averaging 1.1 in net yards per play, the highest in the league. And that's a statistic that Vegas guys use to pick games and casinos use to make lines. So I think I look at that one, and you got to love that part of Atlanta. They also have traveled very well this year, 3-1 straight up and against the spread. Chris, you look at Seattle, Russell Wilson, a lot of injuries on this team. This might be the most injury-prone team in the league right now. Coming off an 11-day bye, where their last game was going to be on a previous Thursday, and then they get this one on a Monday night. I think that's a big deal for this team. What do you see with the Seahawks?
They done what they've done the past 4 or 5 seasons. So they play very well at home. They've got a very stout defense. But when they travel, for whatever reason, things just tend to fall apart with them. So, and I think we've seen that again this season. I believe all 3 of their losses are on the road. So I typically would bet them to win and cover at home and to lose and not cover on the road. That stands pretty well if you can just kind of stick to that strategy.
Seattle has actually had a relatively tough schedule this year. They had to travel to Green Bay early, played the Titans on the road, at the Rams, and had the Redskins at home. And then their last game on a Thursday night was in Arizona. So, it's not like this team has had a cupcake schedule. They've had tough games. They've had to play some pretty good defenses along the way. This defense, the Seahawks defense, has been very, very good. They rank 8th in the league, only giving up 5 yards per play on average. That's very, very good. But we talked about the injuries. Chris, 16 players out, either out or hurt this week. That includes Michael Bennett, Richard Sherman, Jimmy Graham, Earl Thomas, and Eddie Lacy, either out or hurt coming into this game. I think that's a big deal. Seattle -3 is the line. It's in Seattle. Over under 45. Chris, where do you go?
I've got Seattle by a touchdown, 24-17.
24-17. Again, another one we're really close on. I've been selling the Falcons all year. One note about that net yards per play stat, though, a lot of that is inflated when they play home games in a dome. This is in Seattle. It's going to be wet. It's going to be cold. It's going to be a night game. I think that favors an already very strong home field advantage. Give me the Seahawks 27-17 over Atlanta. Let's get to our last game of the weekend. New England at Oakland. The line here is the Patriots -7 and our over-under 54.5. Chris, at the start of the year, we thought this might be the game that was a precursor to the AFC Championship, but the Raiders have not looked good at all this year.
Oh, no, you're right. They've got some kind of weird losses too. Losing to the Chargers and losing to Baltimore, who hasn't been too hot this year. So I'm not sure really what happened. I mean, they still have all their pieces offensively and have been able to move the ball somewhat, but they also allow 370 yards per game on defense. So I think maybe that's the culprit to their losing record.
At the start of the year, everyone was in love with Oakland. They're off to a 4-5 start, and a loss here likely means they would have to win out to have a chance at playoffs. Like between Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, this offensive line, and then they add Marshawn Lynch, we all thought this was going to be one of the best offenses in the league, yet they rank in the bottom half of the league in almost every statistic. Chris, the one thing that really concerns me with the Patriots coming to town is they rank 29th in turnover margin. This defense does not force turnovers, and this offense has given up the ball a lot. Now let's move over to the Patriots. The Patriots got off to that 2-2 rough start, and remember, everyone was so concerned. Since then, they've been rolling. In their last 5 games, they're 5-0, and they are outscoring opponents by an average of 26-13. Offense now ranks first in the NFL in yards per game and 4th in points per game. Chris, Tom Brady looks like he's on some sort of anti-aging drug. I'm not really sure what it is, but he's been incredible this year.
Yeah, and they can't run the ball, and that's like the thing to me is like if you're one-sided in the NFL, usually like you're beatable. But their leading rusher has that Gillespie guy, and he has 4 touchdowns and 355 yards.
Wow, that's not a lot.
No. So they average less than 100 yards total offense per game, and so it's all passing. They're over 316 yards passing. Now their defense does allow teams to score, and that's been not typical of the Patriots. So that's, I don't know. It's this whole season for the Patriots has kind of surprised me.
Well, they're also incredibly hard to get off the field. They rank 5th in the NFL in third down conversions. I think that's a big stat. Chris, let's get to our pick. New England -7. The over/under here, 54.5. Where do you lean with this game?
Don't ask me why, but to me, this is going to be an upset. I've got Oakland winning this game by a point, 28-27. So not only covering, but winning.
Well, it's interesting because I felt tempted to take that pick. I'm like, team that has really struggled this year comes at home. A win would do a lot for them. Like, I don't know. There's something about Oakland at home, and it's like maybe they could pull this one off. It feels like a team you would take. I get a good quarterback, a good offensive line, and they're a huge home underdog against a defense that really started off awful this year. But the Raiders struggled to put away Miami last week and has lost by double digits to the Redskins, the Ravens, and the Bills. So, listen, the Patriots are slightly better than the Redskins, Ravens, and Bills, just slightly better at least. I'm going to swallow the 7 points here. I think they go on the road into Oakland. Oakland scores a late touchdown to keep it fairly close. Give me the Patriots 28-20. They cover that 7-point spread. Chris, any closing thoughts?
No, not really. I know you've got a couple games that you're wanting to get out in your. I think you're going to put out in your blog.
Yeah, on the website.
Some upset games that should be interesting. So head to CJSweatshow.com and check those out.
Yeah, there is one big NFL upset you do not want to miss, and I feel like it's a guarantee to happen. I want to go bet money on it. It's that good of a game. All right, thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate it. Go to CJSweatshow.com for all of the great content for the podcast, Saturday 6 and the CJ Sweat Show. This is CJ Sweat signing out. Have a great weekend.